Good morning and welcome back to another We Are Sunderland morning briefing. It is Monday the 8th of July. We're in partnership with the Farm Museum and Cost Specs Opticians. Don't forget, it's still just £1 for 6 months worth of subscription over on We Are Sunderland. I'm joined this morning by Joe Ramage. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm not bad. I'm bad yourself.
Yeah, splendid. England are through in the Euros. Did you watch it?
Yeah, just about. Don't
It's
make
a
it
tough
easy,
watch, isn't it? It's a tough
it is.
watch.
I'm trying to keep myself focused on sort of like what Portugal did in 2016. I'm mirrored to them, wedded to that now. So hopefully that's where we're going to get to.
I mean, we saw it last year, didn't we? You want to see a bit of like a style of play, just a bit of quality with the players that they've got. Now we're at the semi-final stage. I really couldn't care less how they play, as long as they keep winning. I don't think the history books are going to look back and be, say, oh, well, they didn't play well against Slovenia or Slovakia. They will if we end up getting beat off the Netherlands. But, I mean, it'd be remiss not to mention Jordan Pickford again. I did just a quick bit over the weekend just on where he stands. Where do you think, is he England's best ever? Or do you think he needs to win, silverware like Gordon Banks? I understand, it's different. It's different periods. Football's come on so much since that World Cup win in 1966. Goalkeepers have a lot more of the ball, etc. But his penalty record's just outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think when it goes to shootout now, you almost expect him to save one, don't you? Which is quite a strange place to be in, being English and the amount of shootout heartbreak that we've had over the years. But yeah, like Saturday when he was in goal, I just felt as though he was going to save one. And obviously, he did. And yeah, it's a good question. I think, I don't know, you probably do need that bit of silverware, don't you? You can go back to any sort of, there was the Messi argument, wasn't there, about him winning the World Cup and Ronaldo having the European Championship. Obviously, that got put to rest a couple of years ago. I think if England do win it, then there's a really, really strong case that he is, because, like you say, the way that the game's moved on as well, just in terms of, I mean, his distribution is absolutely tremendous, isn't it? The way he can pick passes out to either flank or, comfortable getting the ball and things like that. But yeah, the penalty record's excellent. I saw a clip on social media over the weekend of the penalty saves that he's made in the tournaments and the World Cup, the 2 in the Euros, the Nations League, and then obviously at the weekend as well. He is absolutely undisputed England's number one. I think there's been times where there's been calls for other keepers like a Ramsdale or someone, but he's never put in really about performance for England, has he? And he's always someone that they can rely on in that shootout situation. So yeah, he's absolutely the undisputed number one at the moment. And if he does go on and win something, whether it be this next week, hopefully, then I think he's got every right to claim that he probably is one of England's best, no doubt about it. And it's just nice to be able to talk about that as even like from a Sunderland perspective, isn't it? I know the players move on and come and go, and he's obviously really well thought of down at Everton for how long he's been there now. But just having those roots here, he doesn't shy away from the fact that he's Sunderland lad. He comes back up. He was at the Derby, wasn't he, for example, in the FA Cup, and it's just nice for supporters to be able to cling on to things like that. And yeah, really proud of and be really proud of what he's doing.
I think I've seen the same clip that you've watched, but what's missing from those saves is, remember in the Nations League where he actually was it the winning penalty, I think, and he just wraps it in the top corner. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that again if it was the winner. But yeah, we'll move things on to Sunderland. Obviously, if you're watching over on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on a single pod. Feel free to interact, drop us a comment, and if you've got any questions, we'll answer them the best we can. We'll quickly touch on last week. I know you and Dom spoke a lot about, obviously, Kristjaan Speakman, Régis Le Bris. The training session was interesting for me. I know we did a quick, immediate re-hit afterwards. And I know since then there's been a lot of talk about Mike Dodds, Mike Proctor still being there. And I know you mentioned it on the recent pod, but it is worth saying again, I think, is he's employed by the club. Like, it's no surprise to see him there. I understand what people are saying is, there's debate to be had around bringing his own staff in. I think that came from an agent, obviously, over the summer. I think it was linked with Will Still. But the club's since come out and said that, look, they are holding interviews over bringing in coaching staff. So I don't necessarily think it's anything. I think sometimes you can be at risk of reading too much into things. He's clearly a highly regarded coach. He was part of the coaching setup under Alex Neil, under Tony Mowbray when the clubs went well. Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one for me. I'm not quite sure. I'm just not quite sure it's as big a defining factor as what some people are making it out to be.
Yeah, it is a bit of a grey area, but I mean, you see the clips from the inside training of the first week, and you can see how instrumental he is in that. Now, obviously, Régis Le Bris is going to be taking a step back. He's going to be monitoring things and just assessing how the lie lands, or how the land lies. Sorry, in that first week, and just to get his ideas across from maybe just those little group sessions that I think you'd asked him about, didn't you? How was those first meetings? That'll probably be how it's been over the course of the first week. It is interesting how Sunderland are doing it. I don't know. I might be misplaced here, but it feels slightly uncommon in terms of you bring a new head coach or a manager in, and then you do the same sort of process for staff. I don't know if I've sort of seen much of that before. You at least sometimes see a head coach or a manager bringing somebody in with them. Now, it's fine. I mean, Régis Le Bris certainly seemed fine that was the process, isn't he? He was, and Kristjaan Speakman backed up the spot that he would be ultimately the one making the final decision on who comes in. Whether that is a case of Régis saying he doesn't want someone from Lorient, he's happy to bring somebody else in. He might have his eye on somebody else that he might have wanted to bring into Lorient, for example. We don't know the ins and outs of that, and we probably won't. Certainly not until somebody's appointed, but even then we probably won't. Like I said on Friday, I think the best thing about it is clearly there is going to be other staff brought in, which there's a lot of people pointed out. We've said quite a few times about how Michael Beale struggled with that. To get it in place sooner rather than later, it'll be key. But I don't necessarily think it's a great problem having those staff still in place. I know that the last season was tarnished because of how it finished, and people will ultimately, want to hit the reset button completely if you're bringing somebody else in. But then, at what point you could then argue? At what point does it stop? How far through the staff do you go of a previous regime? You could. Yeah. You could just continue and go, couldn't you? And then what you're going to do? Just bring 100 people in, so to speak. Obviously that's extremes, but I just think from what Dodds he's gone up the ranks, and now he's probably going to take a step back down the ranks. Is there much harm in that? I don't know. He knows the players really well. He said at some point he wants to be a coach himself. Maybe it'll be at a point where he wants to go off and go and try and pursue that. We don't really know, and like I said, we'll probably not know until a new member comes in, and we maybe get a little bit of a feel from Régis Le Bris about why he was brought in, what he brings, etc. And then we'll get a better idea of the makeup of what the likes of Dodds and Proctor are going to do throughout the season, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point as well, and it wasn't necessarily one that I considered straight away, but it was brought up online, and again, I don't know how true it is, just in terms of whether his former staff at Lorient would qualify, but the work permit situation. Sunderland themselves had a work permit that delayed the move for Régis Le Bris, didn't it, in the first place? So you often think, look, I know that Kristjaan Speakman came out and Régis has said himself that he's only been a senior head coach for 2 years. He doesn't have a designated coaching staff behind him. Like you said, he didn't seem too phased in his first press conference. But the work permit situation's an interesting one because we haven't seen, I think it's at Norwich, was it, where their gaffer's just gone in there and he hasn't been able to bring in coaching staff that he's worked with previously, maybe because they wouldn't pass the work permit requirements. There's also a financial aspect to that. Obviously, when you have to either submit the work permit or go through an appeal process, etc. Now, I'm not suggesting that that wouldn't be the case for Régis Le Bris and Lorient, but it could be a factor. And that's something that I thought was pretty interesting, actually. Because we've seen Sunderland's model of who they're bringing in from various different, player recruitment-wise. But then you look at Sheffield Wednesday as well, and they've got, is it Chris Powell who's there now, alongside Danny Rowell. He's got his coaching staff. So it's not remiss to have, a mismatch of coaching staff. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing either. I think, like you say, I think Mike Dodds, Michael Proctor, they know the players. They've been there for ages. Dodds himself said in one of his, final few press comments towards the end of last year, that he'd be there to help the new head coach, whatever role he wanted him to do. He would have a lot more honest conversations, he said, didn't he? And I do think that that's actually well worth Sunderland having, because it saved them a bit of time, because, again, in his press conference, Le Bris said that he was getting used to his staff, the makeup of his staff, how they can improve that, but players as well. Being able to get that little bit of insight from somebody who's been there for the last, 12 weeks or so of the season, last 12 games, to be able to oversee that. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I do understand, obviously, where, the argument comes from, given how poor at the end of last season was, and Mike Dodds will shoulder a lot of that. But yeah, it's an interesting debate that's sort of going on, isn't it? And I'm not quite sure it necessarily warrants the extent of scrutiny that it's getting at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one size fits all, is there?
Yeah.
I'm going to totally contradict what I've just said in the first couple of minutes here, because I've just sort of thought of, if you think back to Manchester United under Alex Ferguson, the coaches that they brought in, they kind of did it that way, didn't they? You know, if you think of sort of René Mullenstein and Carlos Queiroz, they came in and they were set for coaching the team. You know, there's an element of assistant and then stroke coach. It goes back to exactly what you're saying in terms of the roles that they're given. Is it assistant? Is it coach? Is it blend of both? And like I say, we're not going to really know about it until they come in. But I agree. I think certainly now that you've got the head coach in, there doesn't necessarily need to be as much scrutiny on the fact that those people are still in charge. And the problem is, once we get through pre-season and into the start of the season, if results don't change, then it just opens itself up to being a case in point, just by continuation of being there, really. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. But it will be interesting when someone is appointed to see what the sort of method was and, you know, what blueprint they're kind of trying to go for, particularly from Speakman's point of view and sort of Régis Le Bris' point of view. And then, I guess the main question for everyone will be kind of what Mike Dodds' input will be this season. Will it just be sort of first team coaching? Will there be a little bit of crossover with developmental stuff, with the academy and things like that? What is Graham Murty? Is he going to still be operating in the parameters of the first team? We saw him, you know, under Dodds being almost like an analyst, didn't we? Yeah. Certainly at home games. Is that crossover still going to be there in terms of bringing some of the younger talent up? So there are a few in-house questions that people will be keen to know, but on the face of things, it's all down to the head coach, isn't it now? So it's a case of trying to just get on and kick on with pre-season, I suppose. Yeah,
all about results, all about different opinions as well. I think, you know, you're entitled to your own views on the head coach. We've got ours, views on the coach and staff, etc. We'll move things forward. Obviously, he's in his second week. A double header, South Shields and Gateshead coming up this weekend. It's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's now a friendly fixture that's been in for the past couple of seasons. It's interesting that you have two games on the same day and they've split the squad quite evenly, quite well over the past sort of couple of seasons. You get nice sort of mix-up, of, you know, of youngsters in there with first team players. Get around an hour, so to speak, under your belt. You can do 45 minutes, but it's a decent little fixture as well, isn't it? There's a little bit more time between the two games as well, I think, now. So it'll give us a chance to get from one to the other.
No, it's good. I mean, football's back this week, isn't it, in terms of your domestic stuff? It's twofold. Like exactly what you say, you can get minutes into pretty much everyone in the squad. It helps out local teams as well. It's a chance for fans to see the new head coach, any possible new players, if we were to get any this week, and just get a little bit of a feel of being back in amongst it and excitement levels and things like that, and to draw a complete line under last season and start afresh. It's going to be interesting to see how the squads do split. Tony Mowbray did it last year. Both of them sort of some first teamers, half academy in both games, wasn't it? And both games were entertaining. I think the 4-3 at South Shields and a 3-2 at Gateshead, I think it was. So anything like that it's just a good day for supporters, isn't it? You go and see two games, full squad, meet up again, and it just sets the ball rolling a little bit. Nothing really on results. It's the old cliche, isn't it? It's all about minutes at this stage, but it really is. But it will be nice to see the dynamic of certain academy players and certain first team players. You know, will Tom Watson be in the same squad as Jack Clark, for example? You know, things like that. And we can analyse things like that from over the two games, and then you kick into the Spain camp where things just ramp up a little bit in terms of fitness, where you then start to look for a little bit of shape and you know, just a bit of productivity in how they're doing things going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, I asked him, didn't I, last week about what his first week had been like. Had he been able to sit down with Adil Aushish? The answer to that's over on We Are Sunderland, by the way. You can go and read a little bit of an article just on the first week. This week, it was all about sort of sitting down, and towards the tail end of last week, was sitting down with players individually, having chats. It's interesting to see what I'd be keen to find out what sort of is said in between those conversations. Is it a case of whether what role he sees them playing in the squad? More than likely, whether some, as we've said, the squad needs a trim, in my opinion. Whether, you know, he has an early view on which players he wants to keep around. Again, we'll get a better sort of insight into that over the next couple of friendlies. I think, you know, the style of play was his main focal point for the training sessions that followed. So I think, again, I know you have 2 different friendlies, but that'll be interesting as well to see how they're set up. I know he said that obviously Chris Riggs spoke about him being an 8, a 10, potentially a 6. Exciting that he's not on the right wing. Same with Joe, but he had a clear indication of what role he wanted to play. So there's unanswered questions going into this weekend, but I don't know. I've got a quiet optimism, football's nearly back. We might be completely opposite by the time the pre-season's finished. But yeah, it's exciting that football's back nearly.
Yeah, I mean, what is it they say about the hope that you can't stand? Football, we're all fickle, aren't we, as football fans? You just kind of forget what happened 6 months.
Yeah.
New, fresh ideas, fresh kit, fresh manager, and then you never know. The possibilities are endless. But the positional debate is an interesting one. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where the likes of Rig and Job, in particular, Aushish, because there's quite a few of them. If you go through the squad, certainly in those attacking 4 areas, 3 behind the striker and the striker, where are some of their best positions? We've done a scouting series over the course of the last week, and I found myself in that position where I'm looking at a player and thinking, where is his best position? Job being obviously the key one. Régis Le Bris made no qualms about that, did he? Sort of suggesting that he knows where his best position is, but he needs to have that conversation with him. Well, maybe we might get an idea on Saturday and certainly next week in Spain if he's going to be in one position rather than the other. But there's a few throughout the squad. I mean, Aushish, again, didn't really get much game time under him at Lorient. A couple of injuries at the start and then was sold on to Sunderland as well after the first season. Where does he see him? Is it going to be operating without a striker again, or who we think will be a recognised striker?
I hope not.
Yeah, suddenly all of that optimism we're just talking about would quickly dissipate, wouldn't it? So, yeah, it's exciting in that sense to see some of these things and some of these ideas put into practice. But again, I think reading too much into these 2 games, you can't do a lot of that because it's about minutes and just getting players back on the field in some sort of a game situation, isn't it?
Yeah, now, you brought up the scouting series. It's almost like you're telepathic. We are. But yeah, it's interesting that we had a conversation, didn't we, when you were doing one of those, or not long after you'd finished, to speak about Abdullah Bar here specifically. Now, he's another who's on his day, we mentioned him last year. Ipswich, Portman Road in particular, I thought he was really good. I thought that was one of his best performances of the season. He's another one. Again, is it because they're young, the inconsistencies that they're having? But you brought up the stat to me of how many appearances he's played, and it's quite staggering, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, I was really surprised when I was doing that. I mean, he's 20-year-old and he's already made over 70 appearances for something. Yeah. I mean, when you sit back and think about it, you think, well, yeah, he's been here for 2 years, easily possible, but it just doesn't feel like he's made 70-odd appearances. One thing you would say about him, and you hit the nail on the head there in terms of saying, is the age due to the inconsistency or a reason for the inconsistency rather? And I think it probably is, but his numbers have steadily improved. Yeah. It might not feel like it because results as a whole, and there are frustrations there sometimes with his final decision. I mean, you think back to that Middlesbrough game, the chance that he missed in that game, they're sort of things, that the Watford game at the Stadium of Light, I think, or the Coventry, where he put it over the bar, Michael Bale's first game, things like that. He needs to polish things like his end product up, whether it be he's crossing his final ball or that, finishing, shooting aspect of it. If he wants to, I'm not going to say replace Jack Clark because you're not going to really be able to replace him properly, the numbers and sort of what his output, but at least take the next step up to getting somewhere near that in producing more goals and more assists, which we need. Sunderland need that from a player like him. We need that from a Patrick Roberts again. You need it from Nazari Rusa, and you can go right the way through those attacking players, and the club will be saying we need that from a lot of players this season, even more so if Clark's going to leave, and then whoever's going to come in, you need more output just with goals and assists. But his numbers in terms of minutes played, his goals and assists have gone up from that first season. His XG and things like that, they're all tracking the right way. The club will sit and look at that data. We know that they will, and they will think that he is on track to keep doing well. Régis Le Bris said it in his press conference, and he said that there's a lot of strengths, a lot of disappointment in the squad, and there was a lot of disappointments last season, young players, but the 2 seasons that they've had, that will give them a lot of experience, and Bar's probably one of those. He's going into his third season now. He's going to be knocking on the door to probably be a regular starter in his mind. Need to start taking it to the next step, don't you? We've seen other players doing that. You've Job in his first season, for example. Clark, what he's done when he turned his move permanent. Can Abdullah Bar start taking a little bit more of a step up and get closer to that kind of level? Big pre-season for him, like we said, for quite a few.
Yeah, and Régis Le Bris, and obviously we knew that he needed to have this next head coach would have a background in youth development. That's going to be interesting as well to see how he brings on these types of players like Abdullah Bar. I don't want to go over this all ground because I've just literally said that. Look, I think they need to bring in a striker, but can he get a tune out of the ones that they brought in? Look, Eliza Mayenda, Lusimir Semedo. We all in agreement. I think everybody is almost that Nazari Rushin is the furthest forward. Is he a striker? He wanted to play off the left. Could we see that this year? There's loads of question marks about it. I think, interestingly, Vito Minoni came out, didn't he, and spoke about having worked under Le Bris and developing players in France. It does bode well, but again, I know proof will be in the pudding, won't it?
100%. There's a lot of players who, given their age and given Le Bris' background, should be cautiously optimistic that they can think that their game can go on to another level, just given what he's done in France and the amount of time he spent in developmental coaching and some of the players that have come through from there. I mean, there's quite a few French contingent in there who he will probably be aware of. Certainly, he probably will be aware of Bar, given where he come out with Le Havre, didn't he? I would imagine that he'll be a name that will be on the circuit there that Le Bris will be aware of. There's quite a few. So in that aspect, as a player going in, one thing you would say about a new head coach going in, everyone gets a clean slate, don't they?
Yeah.
So you start from a scratch from last week when he started and they came back into training. Everyone's got the same chance to try and impress him. And then these games coming up just emphasise that. So whether we as reporters and supporters who will then go into the stadium will have their own views on people, we've just spoke about Bar and some of the frustrations. That's a clean slate for him. He can go in and start. He could be named on the team sheet first day of the season on merit from what's happened between now and August the 10th, I think it is. So it's a huge opportunity for everyone, and that likewise players coming in as well.
Yeah, and obviously Kristjaan Speakman, he spoke, on Friday as well. The interesting takeaway for me, aside from obviously the contract updates, was the view of this window. It was quality over quantity, I think, was the underlying message, and that was something that we've reiterated. I think everybody who covers Sunderland fans have said that they brought in last year maybe too many that weren't at the level that they needed to be at. Now, that's not to say they won't get to that level, but I thought that was a really interesting sort of takeaway from that conversation, which maybe suggests why it's been a little bit slow so far. They're aiming for championship experience. That's been reiterated, and it's good to see that these, again, the proof will be in the pudding. It's all right saying, we're going out and trying to get these players, and then if you don't get them in and you're left with the same position where you were at the end of the January window, then it's all hot air, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, the good thing is that there does seem to be an acceptance that there might be a slight tweak in what we see in terms of players coming through the door. You mentioned the 11 who came in last summer. We're talking about trimming the squad. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those go out on loan.
Yeah,
this summer, you look at someone like a Mayenda or Hamia. Can they go out and get in Mayenda's case, Juice and Burnett, another one, for example, get better loans because they didn't feature enough in the ones that they went out on in the second half of the season. Hamia, he was the one who featured the most out of any of the forwards brought in last summer, but looked quite a way short. He's got to adapt to the culture. Mike Dodd's referenced that, how he was sort of surprised by what was being asked of him in terms of the running and the pressing and things like that. Will a loan move suit someone like him in English football lower down the pyramid where he can get used to that in competitive game situations? So that wouldn't surprise me. And then, in terms of bringing people in, it just feels as, we've said it so many times about experience, but it does feel as though Le Bris said it in his first press conference. I feel, would he have said that if that isn't something that the club aren't thinking of doing? I'd be highly unlikely to do that in your first press conference. Kristjaan Speakman then sort of backed it up. And with losing, I know Bradley Dack didn't feature very often, but just that experience in the dressing room, Evans obviously then being the main one, losing players like that, you need one or two players in there just to bounce some things off. So I'd fully expect a couple of players. I mean, we've got the goalkeeper in Simon Miller, didn't we? We saw him come in early. It wouldn't surprise me if we see one or two others throughout the spine of the team in that kind of mould, just to bring a bit of experience in and around the place, and just to help this young squad, and hopefully in some of the key positions to be starting as well, like we've said before.
Yeah, I mean, Ollie Norwood, I think this has been mentioned with, free agent midfield. It would be an interesting one there, a slightly different signing, given, I think is he 33, I think? I'll double check that, because obviously, but he's that would go against sort of what we've seen so far in terms of signings from the current, sporting director. Yeah, 33. So having let go of Evans, he was. I suppose with Evans, it goes back to the injury and lack of minutes he's played. Ollie Norwood, what sort of it all depends on finances, etc., doesn't it? And what sort of contract deal players are looking for. It's an interesting one though. Promotion winner, vastly experienced. True addition, or do you think it's perhaps one to avoid?
I mean, well, it strikes me as the one who would replace Evans. Wouldn't it? I mean, nearly 400 appearances in the Championship. We've heard Kristjaan Speakman sort of say the experience, it might not necessarily be the age, it might be more on numbers. Well, you're probably going to get both here. Thing is, it's obviously wouldn't be a long-term deal, would it? That could be a stumbling block. You would imagine Norwood at this stage of his career would be looking for certainly 2 years to try and tide him over. Would Sunderland just would it be a year, and then with the option of another year? I think you quite rightly point out about Evans' injury. That might have been the reason behind that. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because then you could think, well, if he's up to scratch, if you think you can get a pre-season out of him, would it have been more beneficial to keep him, knowing that he's been around the place for a couple of years now? Or do you think you could go and get more output from somebody like a Norwood? I mean, you're not necessarily going to get loads of goals and assists. You might get a few yellow cards and things like that. But yeah, like nearly 400 Championship appearances, nearly 100 Premier League appearances, promotions on his CV. It ticks quite a lot of boxes in terms of what fans will probably want.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a surprise to see someone like coming. A welcome surprise to see someone like that coming. I certainly think he's got certainly another season to offer, hasn't he? Could he have stayed at Sheffield United? Possibly. It's an interesting thing that. But then you could look at someone like Jan Via, who went to West Brom in January, didn't really do much. Didn't get much game time. Sunderland fans are probably clamouring to bring someone like him in. Obviously, sentimental value as well. There's pros and cons to bringing those kinds of players in, and I mean, look at Bradley Dack as well, who came in. Sunderland will argue that they've some players that they have brought in just haven't worked out. That's why they try and stick with a younger model. So there's risk as there is with any transfer, but certainly in terms of the experience at this level, he's someone that has been referenced quite a lot, just like what Mike Dodd said, Kristjaan Speakman said, Régis Le Bris said, just players who've played over 100, 200 games at Championship level, which I think the squad does need. I think everyone will accept that the squad needs that kind of player. So, but yeah, you would imagine if they're going to bring a player like that in, it will be a free agent rather than go and spending money on someone like that.
Yeah, I think obviously somebody that they were going to spend money on, they haven't, was Callum Styles as well. What sort of targets are they aiming for? Because you obviously want an improvement on that. You've already turned down the option to make that a permanent one. I know we've spoken about in the past. Interesting, somebody who has plenty of Championship experience, but clearly someone that Sunderland don't feel did enough during that loan spell.
No, and that's it. So again, if you're thinking that someone like Norwood would produce more, certainly in that defensive midfield area, then you well within your rights to go for that, aren't you? I think the good thing with Styles is although we'd argue that we didn't see enough of him in that midfield position, he did get sort of 12 or 13 appearances under his belt where Sunderland will judge the numbers and the data and things like that. And for what they want and what Régis Le Bris wants, obviously don't feel as though it marries up. So quite interested to see what happens with Styles, whether he stays at Barnsley this season or whether he moves on. There's a lot of spinning plates, isn't there? It feels like, and I think we said this on Styles when the decision got made. If they're not going to bring him in for a fee, it suggests to me that they certainly feel as though there's somebody there that is going to come in, or that they have their eye on to bring in as a replacement almost. I know he wasn't their player, but you're losing another player in that position, which is already quite light anyway. And we spoke again about people like a Dan Neil or a Pierre were moving further forward. So it suggests to me that they're fully aware that is a position that they need to strengthen, even just with some of the names that have been linked.
Yeah, and I know it's obviously clear as day. But the sooner they bring these types of players in, the better. You know, the more cohesion you get throughout pre-season. I think ideally, just my opinion, nothing to go off, but I think ideally you'd want in maybe one or two faces in before the trip to Alicante. Yeah. You know, Jack Clark obviously joined them out in Portugal when he signed on a permanent deal. So you'd want to start to get the ball rolling a little bit, just because, you know, you've got Forest, which is a decent opposition to come up against. Then, you know, the second division Spanish side. But yeah, I do think we'll see or at least I like to think would see a little bit of movement in the coming weeks.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're spot on there. You'd like to see at least one who you think, right, he's probably going to be in the starting 11 this season. You'd like to see them be in for the trip to Spain next week, wouldn't you? Just so they can get acclimatised to the squad, and that's going to be probably the most intense week of training. That'll be where they really get the load into the players and things like that. I mean, going back to Norwood as well, what would you think about something? Do you think that makes sense for someone to bring someone like that in?
It's interesting because my opinion has changed slightly, which is why I referenced the age, because I think, let's just double check. I'll check Corey Evans, but I think, like you say, that's why I mentioned Corey Evans' injury. He's 33 as well. So the players of the same age. But so if you justify getting rid of Corey Evans because of his injury record, then fair enough. I understand it. Obviously, Oliver Norwood played what I think was 28 games in the Premier League last year, so it's a higher level. Obviously, that wasn't in a very good Sheffield United side. That's worth mentioning. But again, you know, just because the club that you're playing at isn't playing well doesn't mean you're a bad player. We've got Jack Clark from Sunderland last year. I do think that that's an area of the pitch that they need to look at. I've just been doing a little bit of like background reading just on, you know, Sheffield United fan opinion. And again, social media isn't necessarily the best gauge for that, but suggestions that his legs have gone. I think if you've got willing runners around him, then you'd be okay. But again, I can't confess to have watched a great deal of him. But look, his profile is somebody that they do need. They need somebody who's won promotion. They know how, you know, they've got the nous of the championship. Will it be him? We'll wait and see. I think another name that's been, you know, just linked this morning, Jack Cork. I think it's not necessarily the first time I've heard his name sort of bandied about, but you can see that there's been a clear, you know, change or in much, you know, change in targets that Sunderland are going for. They've come out and they've repeatedly said, you know, last year it was very much playing down the experience, I think, because they didn't get the targets that they wanted. You know, Kiefer Moore, someone in January who they didn't get. But it's clear as day they need more now. So they need just to see out games. It felt last year that there was far too many games where Sunderland were naive. I think the Southampton game away, where they brought it back to, it was a 2-2, and then, you know, with Job's screamer, and then they've gone for it, but ended up getting beat 4-2, whereas they didn't play particularly well, and that should have been a game that they probably should have shut up shop. It wouldn't have been a bad result getting a point down there, but you've come away with nothing now. Again, I understand Mike Dodds' point of view. You know, we'll go to win football matches, but that for me just screamed like the need more know-how, and Southampton's squad was a lot better than Sunderland's. As you see, they've gone on to win promotion. But yeah, really long-winded answer to that is, I don't know. I understand. Look, the profile would marry up with what people are asking for and what we've at least suggested. But 33, what sort of deal are you looking at? That everything has to sort of line up and marry up. There's got to be alignment, hasn't there?
I think that's, you mentioned Cork there as well. I think he's 35. That one would be. Yeah. I think that would probably be a touch too far. I can't imagine someone will go out and bring a player like him in, but who knows? You know, it could be a sea change this summer. Well, there already has been, hasn't there? It might continue. Who knows?
Yeah. But that's it. Like, sort of final point from us. I think it's clear. Look, the experience has to be addressed this summer. And again, we're not calling out for, you know, 35, 36, Kristjaan Ronaldo at 39, however old he is, to go and bring out players like that. But you do. One interesting one that I've named in, and again, it's probably a shot in the dark, but Callum O'Hare from Coventry is probably eyeing up a move to a Premier League club. Who can blame him? But he is every time I've watched him, he's been class. But he's somebody who I think Sunderland, look, are they in there? This is just my opinion. There's nothing to suggest that they're even in talks or anything like that. But I think a player of that ilk, that's more the direction I would go in. Again, I know he plays as a 10 and Sunderland have got plenty number 10s, but someone who he's just a spark. He's something different, I think. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see where we'll go from here.
Absolutely. I mean, we could go around on a sort of football manager where we go around here and just look down free agent list. So there was one name I picked out, so, Nathaniel Chalobah, he's a free agent at the moment, someone like that, 29, experience Watford, West Brom, things like that. But again, you could go down a list and you think, oh, would that be a sort of player that someone could look at in that whole midfield role or a striker role, for example? It's going to be interesting either way what they do. But the fact that some of these names, for example, are being thrown out there, or there is a little bit of interest, does suggest that they are looking to address that area of the field, which has to be considered a positive. Yeah,
and we'll draw things nicely to a close there. So we've been in partnership with the Farm Museum and Cost Specs Opticians. Don't forget, you can subscribe to We Are Sunderland for just £1. You get unlimited access to everything that we do over there, exclusive interviews, tactical analysis, and obviously transfer insight. Thanks again for joining us this morning. We'll catch you later in the week.